Dr. Danny Lehnert, a physical therapist, strength coach, and baseball coach at Eclipse Wellness in Sterling, Virginia. And today I want to talk about a component of arm care that I often feel like is missing for baseball players. So last week I talked about arm care as it related specifically to coaches, but focusing a lot on soft tissue mobility, joint mobility, muscle activation, and recovery. So there's two components of arm care. There's the recovery part. So if I go and throw, I need my arm to be able to recover so I can go out and throw the next day or 2 days later or whatever that is because I'm feeling better. But there's also the strengthening component, which means that my arm is more resilient. It can handle more load, it can handle more force, and it doesn't wear down as quickly. So there's a lot of schools of thought when it comes to lifting with arm care. Now, some people will advocate for a lot of band work, higher reps, lower weight. Some people will say higher weight, lower reps. Some people will say isometrics, things like that. The truth is that all those things have a valuable role, and it depends on the individual. But something that is missed a lot, whether it be strength coaches, baseball coaches, or physical therapists, are plyometrics. So plyometrics refers to the use of the stretch shortening cycle. So if you've ever, usually plyometric training, we're talking about jump training. When we're talking about the lower body, it's easier to conceptualize. Where if I'm jumping, I'm landing and then quickly going up as fast as I can to jump again to try to train my body to move quickly. So imagine if you're a basketball player, it's pretty helpful. You go up for a rebound, maybe you need to land and jump again really quickly. You're training your body to do that instead of jumping and landing slowly and coming back up. You're training those muscle fibers, the fast twitch muscles, to move quickly to make that happen. So with baseball, we want to look at the throwing motion, in particular with arm care, and there's a lot of stretch shortening going on there. The shoulder's the easiest example to understand. But imagine when I'm pitching, I come into a position of layback here. I'm not just staying in this position for a long time. I'm getting in here and whipping out of it quickly because I'm getting to that end range of external rotation in my shoulder. And it's like a rubber band where it's going back there and it's coming forward because that's how I generate my power. I have a lot less power if I'm doing this versus if I'm going whipping through quickly to make that movement happen. So we want to use plyometric training for the different joints, the wrist, the elbow, and the shoulder of the upper body in order to train those to quickly react when we're trying to throw, to create that rubber band whip-like movement that's going to make velocity and power a lot easier to come by. Now, it's important to understand what we're talking about when we're talking about power. So power in a classical equation is work over time. So we have two options when we're trying to increase power. We can increase work, meaning we can get stronger, we can be more capable, we can move things faster, we can move more things, or we can talk about time, which time is an inverse relationship, meaning if time takes longer, then power goes down because we're dividing by a higher number here. But if time goes down, power goes up. So if I'm able to do the same work in 1 second instead of 10 seconds, then I have more power because I did it more quickly. I pushed a weight in 1 second instead of 10 seconds. That's more power being created. That's what we're trying to achieve with plyometrics. We want to maximize our work, obviously, so we should definitely still be getting stronger in the gym, but we also want to minimize our time so that way our power output is optimized, and that's going to help us on the mound. That's going to help us perform in a lot of things, especially baseball related. So now I want to talk about how I like to program plyometrics, and then specifically some plyometrics I like to use, as I mentioned, for the wrist, the elbow, and the shoulder as it relates to arm care. When it comes to programming plyometrics, it's important to understand that plyometrics are a very stressful activity. We're using the fast twitch muscle fibers, we're using them very quickly, so we're typically going to do lower repetitions, 5 to 10 repetitions, taking a break to giving our body time to recover. Because if you think about if I'm pitching a baseball, even if I'm hitting a baseball, things like that, I'm making a pitch and then I at least have a few seconds to recover. I'm not doing a bunch in a row. What I see a lot of people do is they'll do training and they'll do like 20, 30 repetitions in a row. And by then, the repetitions at the end are not creating that power because your body's so fatigued, you're teaching it slower movement patterns instead of faster movement patterns. So the other things we want to consider when we're putting plyometrics into a training equation are they should be one of the first things that we do because we want to start with the compound movements first and we want to start with the highest stress movements first. You want to end with something like a bicep curl where you're sitting there because it's not requiring much of your body. You still have the mental energy and the nervous system energy to focus on just doing this if I'm sitting versus a plyometric. If you try to do it at the end, it's going to be very sloppy. It's not going to be beneficial. You want to do that in the beginning. Now, I also love for players to stagger their high-low days in terms of intensity so they have plenty of time to recover. So the other mistake I see a lot of players make, especially this time of year in the late off season, is they'll plan to throw a bullpen, let's say on Monday, and they'll say Tuesday I'm going to get after it in the weight room, and then Wednesday I'm going to do some long toss, and then Thursday I'm going to do a heavy lift again, and then Friday I'm going to throw off the mound again. there's no relaxation, there's no rest days. So what I like to have pitchers do is, if it's a day you're going to throw off the mound or do, long toss or similar high intensity, we're going to lift after that. We're going to start with the plyometrics after that. So you're going to warm yourself up, you're going to lift, you're still going to be pretty warm from the lift. You're going to throw. You're still going to be pretty warm from the throw. You're going to jump right into plyometrics, your other lifting program, things like that. So ideally, the next day is more focused on mobility recovery, and then you can hit it hard the next day or whatever your plan dictates. But you want to make sure, especially before the season, that you're giving yourself days of rest so that you can recover and be ready for the season, because it's a long season. You don't want to be burning out right now trying to do throwing one day, heavy lifting the next day. You want to be staggering those things, and you want to put those plyometrics early in the program when it comes to lifting. So the first exercise I want to talk about plyometric wise is a simple ball toss. This is great for training the wrist and specifically the muscles of the forearm to get ready for releasing the ball when we're pitching, to get that movement, that spin rate and everything like that as we're coming through our fingers here. Now, I've posted about ball flips before and people really seem to like them, so I want to break it down a little bit more. So I like to have athletes start with a heavier weight, and I like to have them try to focus on a fuller range of motion when we're getting started here. So just supporting your arm on here, we're coming down like this, we're going all the way up, catch, and come down. So as you're learning, you can slow the process down, but as you get better, it's going to be more of a fluid movement where we're coming down through here. And I want folks to be absorbing the force as we're coming all the way down. I don't want it to just be short movements like that. I want to be going through that whole range of motion. Now, when we start, it's okay to go a little slow like this, but as we start getting better, we want to start focusing on quicker catches and movements. And like I said, limiting to 5 to 10 repetitions. So you can usually do 10 with these. They're not as stressful, but I want them to be quality repetitions. Now, counterintuitively, as people get stronger and better at these, I try to drop their weight down so they're using a lighter ball to do it, because then we're going to be able to go quicker movements and focusing more on the power component of decreasing the time. Now, you can play around with different weights, stuff like that, see what you like, but it's fun to go lighter sometimes and really force yourself to go as fast as possible to really stimulate that stretch shortening reflex. So it's a great way to introduce some light plyometrics for the wrist and the forearm muscles here. Now I'll show you another exercise that I love for the forearm muscles as well. A harder exercise to train the wrist and the forearm muscles plyometrically is a pulse on a barbell here. Now, we want to think about the fact that when we throw, we typically throw with 2 fingers. So those are the 2 fingers are typically trained with these, and that makes it a little bit easier to understand the mechanism of the movement. So we're going to think about putting our fingers on the barbell here, comfortable distance, and you can just start by just moving through here of seeing what that feels like. Now, it's going to be a little bit easier sometimes if you're a little closer to your hand. If you're more out towards your fingertips, that's going to be a little more challenging, but that will replicate that release of the ball, that spin rate like we talked about of the ball coming off of your fingertips there. Now you can start being more upright and just kind of moving through here. As you get stronger, you can be more out here like this, putting more weight through the fingers. And then as we start getting comfortable, we can do a little bit of a pulse with it where we're coming up plyometrically, moving slowly, get a little closer, and we can start going faster as we're moving through there. Now, these take a while to get good at and to feel, but they can be very beneficial, especially for the muscles of the hand, the grip strength, everything like that. These are muscles that we often neglect because we do a lot of endurance training with, squeezes or working on rice buckets and things like that. And then we kind of lose out on the plyometric component that we need to work on. If you don't have access to a barbell, then you can always try to use a band or something that's looped under you that you're kind of doing this type motion through here. But I think it's good to give the barbell a try, really feel how much weight your body has and how much you're able to push through your fingers and really get that kinesthetic feel that'll help you when you're out on the mound of really focusing on, spin rate coming through the ball like that, of understanding how those muscles function. So give those a try for the wrist and forearm, and next we're gonna talk about the elbow. So when we talk about the elbow with plyometrics, we're talking about 2 main muscle groups, the biceps and the triceps. The biceps are the ones that flex your elbow like this, the triceps extend it. So with this movement that we're gonna talk about, which is a hang drop, which I've shown before, we're talking about the biceps here. We're gonna think about doing a row and then letting go and catching ourselves using our biceps mainly, and also the muscles in the back of our shoulder to stop ourselves from falling down. So you can use a barbell of different heights. It's easier when you get started to be more horizontal. So with a lower barbell, almost like you're doing the inverted row, pulling it to your chest. So an inverted row would be me coming through here like this and just coming up and down here. That's a great exercise, but it's obviously not plyometric. So what we're going to do instead is when we get to the top, we're going to do a gentle to start, let go, and catch, where we're having to stop our body from falling to the ground. Now, as you get better, you can go longer and longer where your body's getting closer and closer to the ground as you're catching yourself. So we're here, start easy, right up here. And as we get harder, start to drop down and catch yourself lower down. Those are a taxing exercise. Once again, I'd stick to the 5 to 10 rep range depending on how you're doing. You're going to be sore after doing them. You might not feel it right away, but you want to be safe when you're doing it. You want to get started with those. But these are a great way to work on that bicep, which takes a lot of force when we're throwing a ball and has to slow us down quickly. It's a great way to train it with sudden movements like this. So next one I'll show you is really working more so on the triceps of the elbow. So we just talked about the biceps. Now we're going to talk about the triceps. So the triceps are used to extend your elbow. The easiest exercise to understand the triceps is a push-up. The easiest exercise to train in plyometric is a plyometric push-up. So what we're going to think about doing is a regular push-up. Now, if you're not able to do regular push-ups, so you want to work on these, you can always elevate yourself. So you can put your hands on, whether it's a barbell or a bench or something like that, where I'm going up higher and I'm still getting that plyometric force. A big misconception is the idea of we can't do plyometrics until we have a strong strength base. So people come up with things of like, don't do a plyo push-up until you can do 20 regular push-ups or things like that. I don't think that's the case because you're still throwing a baseball at that point, so you might as well train plyometrically to prepare for those loads. It'd be great if you got stronger at doing push-ups, and you should work on that, but I have plenty of folks where I'll have them do regular push-ups on the ground, but then plyometric push-ups on a bar, on a bench, or something like that, and then eventually working towards plyometric push-ups on the ground. So we don't want to create this boogeyman involving plyometrics. If you can't do it, you can't do it, you can't do it. But then meanwhile, you're out there throwing 80 pitches on the mound plyometrically. That doesn't really make any sense. We want the training to mimic what we're doing on the mound. So a plyometric push-up is very simple. Once again, when you start, you can go a little bit slow to understand what it is. So we're coming down through here, coming up and catching ourselves, up and catching ourselves, feeling that slow movement. But like we talked about, a plyometric, the key is actually the rapid stretch shortening cycle. So if we're really looking plyometrically, we need to do it fast, as quick as we can to replicate what we're doing on the mound. And once again, sticking to 5 to 10 repetitions of we're here going down, like that. It's that quick movement and catch that you're feeling in your pec, you're feeling in your tricep of having to stop your body from going forward and then immediately springing into the next one as fast as you can. The better you get and the more you practice, the faster you'll be able to do them, and the more confidence you'll have in it. So there's definitely a learning curve with a lot of these, but it's worth it if you're trying to become a better thrower and recover better. Now, we just covered 2 exercises for the elbow. Next, I want to focus on the shoulder. An easy plyometric for the shoulder is using a medicine ball. Now, there are a lot of different things we can do with a medicine ball. We can do more of a, shot put type throw. We can do a quick chest pass. We can do a rotation through here. You can do a lot of things. You can do them from both sides to replicate both sides of swinging, throwing, really training your body both ways. Now, a medicine ball throw is not a traditional plyometric because you're not getting that stretch shortening cycle. Now, you can mimic that of, I can start here, come back quickly and come forward and try to mimic that as much as possible. The other thing you can do is if you have a partner, someone can toss you, or if someone's tossing me and I just catch it into this position and go as fast as I can, I'm kind of mimicking that movement. It's not the purest plyometric in the sense of the world, but it's a good way to train. It's a good way to get the shoulders moving, and it's a good way to feel that core connection as we're coming through plyometrically of loading everything and doing it quickly and explosively. So not a traditional plyometric, but I do love it, especially for the shoulder. Another couple plyometric exercises I love for training specifically the posterior rotator cuff and the back of the shoulder are going to be using a plyo ball. So the first one is just going to be a reverse throw here. We're throwing it up and catching it, coming down through here. And it's the same thing with the ball flips as before. You can focus on when you're started nice and slow, full range of motion, maybe use a heavier ball. But as you get better, it turns into still full range of motion, just quick movements as fast as we can, replicating that. I'm pitching, boom, I'm coming out of that lay back position as fast as I can. Another one I love would be laying on your stomach here and just ball drops out to the side. So I'm here, coming through there, just dropping the ball and trying to catch it using those back of the shoulder muscles to stimulate and contract as if we were trying to slow our arm down when we're pitching through there. So the medicine ball is great for stimulating the front of the shoulder typically. I love these for stimulating the back of the shoulder. So that covers a lot of the exercises that I wanted to show. We'll wrap up real quick and just kind of summarize how I like to use plyometrics in my programming. That summarizes all my thoughts on plyometrics as it relates to the upper body, especially for throwers. Now, it's important to understand the mechanism of plyometric with the stretch shortening cycle like we talked about. Once you understand the mechanism and the need that you need to probably train along the spectrum, you should train with heavy weights, slower time. You should train with lighter weights faster. You should train some plyometrics. You need to take ownership over your own training, and plyometrics are a piece of that puzzle to understand what makes you the best athlete and the best thrower and the best recoverer that you can be, so you can go out and throw again a few days later and feel better. This is just how I like to use plyometrics at Eclipse Wellness in Sterling. If you're ever in the area, you're welcome to stop in for an assessment. We can chat about programming, anything like that. If you have any injuries, we'd be happy to help with that. But I appreciate you watching. Please share this with someone if you found it helpful, and stay tuned for next week. Thanks.